Okay.
Is this on?
Yes, it is. I see the numbers on
Okay.
there. Okay. So we're going to start with if you would give us your full name and your date of birth.
Okay, Donald Morris Miller, born October the 4th, 1915.
1915. Wow. Were you born in Indiana?
In Indianapolis, Indiana.
Awesome. Do you know where your parents were from? Were they from Indiana?
Yes, at the time of my birth, my mother was on the south side of Indianapolis, and my dad was too at that time. He was originally from Illinois, and then Shelbyville, Indiana, and then Indianapolis, Indiana.
What did your dad do? Do you know?
Yes, he was a farmer, and then he worked for Central States Bridge and Structural Steel Company in Indianapolis,
Wow.
and they furnished steel for buildings and highway bridges and everything, and it stands out the speedway and
Wow.
fabricated steel for the buildings and highways.
Awesome. Do you know that your house there on Olive Street, 1644 Olive Street, the interstate runs right through there
That's
now?
right.
Yes, it does. So your dad may have had a part in that.
1721 Olive Street was what it was.
Was it?
Yeah, just south of Minnesota on the east side of Olive Street.
Okay, because your birth certificate says 1644 Olive.
Well, yeah, that's probably was when I was born, because I was probably with my mother and dad at that time.
So 1720 Olive is where
1721 Olive.
21
That's when we come down the interstate.
Yeah, listen to this. This is funny.
When we come down the interstate there, and we look over that way, just there by Minnesota Street, you see, and I say, that's where I was born, in the upper story of a vacant lot.
And we just crack up over that.
Yeah. So did your mother work at all?
Yes, she was a telephone operator, and she's also, they had a millinery shop, what they call it, for hats, as they call it. And she was a good seamstress, and she worked in a store there, Fountain Square, and helped makes hats, but she was a telephone operator for Bell Telephone. And now this is something else. She was in the Hallville, west side of Indianapolis,
Right.
in 1913 when White River flooded, and she was able to get on the last streetcar that got across the bridge before that all flooded in that whole area there.
Oh, wow. 1913.
Yeah.
The Great Flood of Indianapolis.
Yes, right.
So, did you know your grandparents?
My grandmother, yes. Not my grandfather was. I remember him because I was about 3 years old, and he was there with us, and he had a watch that he held up to my ear, and I remember him let me listen to that watch. He was a Civil War veteran,
Wow.
and he was in a veterans home in Danville, Illinois,
Wow.
and he's buried in a military cemetery there in Danville.
That's really
And he
cool.
fought in he was an Indiana Volunteer Regiment, and he fought in the Battle of Bunker Hill, Lookout Mountain.
Okay.
Oh.
Do you remember what his name?
Benedict Miller.
Benedict Miller. Awesome. And what about your grandmother? Do you remember?
My grandmother on the Miller side of the family was deceased.
Okay.
But he had sisters and he had brothers that was part of the family, and then the grandfather Miller that was still living at that time.
Wow, that's really awesome. And so you don't remember your father's parents? Oh, no, that would be your father's parents. Do you remember your mother's parents?
Oh yes, yes.
And what were their names?
Rader, R-A-D-E-R.
Okay.
And
What
they
do you-
lived at the corner of Olive, and Minnesota.
Okay.
I've got pictures of that. I've even got pictures of that house.
Oh, we'd like to see those. Do you remember anything about your great grandparents? Were they alive when you were?
No,
No, they were already gone. And then what was your household like when you were say 5 or 6? Back to your earliest memory.
Yes.
What was your house like? Walking in, if I walked in your front door, could you describe what your house was like when you were 5 or 6? What you
well,
remember?
it was just a plain cottage type house there on Olive Street, and we were just across the street there on the west side of Olive Street, just down from Minnesota.
Right.
And now they had, I can tell you, I can remember the bedrooms and the living room, but you know, back then you wouldn't pay that much attention to that. You know, we had we raised chickens. We had chicken house there in the backyard.
So you raised chickens. Let me get this started here. I forgot to start this. Okay. Put that right there. So, do you remember if your house had like pocket doors, or did it have any fretwork, what they called, inside? Or was it just pretty much a plain house?
Yep, just a plain cottage.
Plain cottage house, okay. And you had chickens in the backyard. What chores were you expected to do as a child?
None.
So you had siblings, yes? Did you have brothers?
Yes.
And what were their names?
Harold Miller was my brother, younger brother.
Okay, so you just had the one brother?
Yes.
All right. So how much younger than you was he?
About 6 years younger.
6 years younger, okay. And you didn't have to do any chores. So what did you do on the weekends as a child?
I had a newspaper route
Okay.
when I was about 9, 10 years old.
And so they would drop the newspapers off, and you
Yeah,
in the morning or the evening or both?
evening,
Evening news.
Indianapolis News.
Well, I think it was the Times then, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't have the time, but my son did, her brother did.
At
have
the Times, okay.
Times,
So
yeah.
you had the news. Do you remember how much it cost to get the newspaper back then?
Oh, I think probably about 15 cents a week, something like that.
Wow. So how much did you get paid?
about a nickel, imagine.
Did you go to church as
Yes.
a child? What church did you attend?
Edgewood Methodist Church on
Okay.
East Sepler Avenue
Right.
in Indianapolis. And that was,
That's where we were at.
well, we went to Bart Place, was it Raymond and Shelby?
Yeah.
And then we moved from there to Edgewood, and then started going to the Edgewood Methodist Church.
You followed the same path my mom's parents did, yeah? They started at Fletcher Place, went to Barth Place,
Yeah.
and then went to...
Well, my mother went to Fletcher Place too as a child.
Did she?
Yes,
And what was your mother's name?
Hilda.
Hilda. right.
Hilda.
Okay. So how did you spend your childhood days? You had a newspaper route. Do you remember any games that you guys played as children?
We played what they called Hawk on Davy, Knock on Davy. We had a rock to put out in the middle of the street, and it had a, then that was your Davy. You put it on there, and the idea was that you would knock that off. But in the meantime, you would run and try to get your rock off of that thing without them knocking it off. If they knocked it off, you had to pick it up and, get back to what's called tarls, and so then played hide and seek as a child.
Right.
I had roller skates as a child, was roller skated, and then I'd made a scooter out of the skates and used that, like with a tube of horse and a
And you
skate,
build it.
build it myself, yeah.
I bet you boys gave your mother a run for her money, didn't you?
Yes,
Yes. So, you went to school. You said at School 18.
yes.
Yeah. Do you remember any of your teachers at School 18?
Well, there was a teacher by the name of Golay, Golay,
Golay.
and
Do you remember who your favorite teacher was at School 18?
not particularly.
No?
No.
Then, so how long did you attend School 18? Did you start first grade there?
Well, I had this kindergarten. Mrs. Herman was her name,
Okay.
and Miss Herman, I should say. She was never married, and it was a school kindergarten at Cottage Avenue and Shelby Street.
Okay. And Miss Herman.
Yes.
Do you remember anything from kindergarten days?
Well, I remember going to kindergarten, but I don't remember too much about it.
You just went a
Yeah.
half day
Yeah,
in the morning?
yeah,
Yeah.
and well, and then there was I know it was probably about the sixth grade, or they had a play at at school that I was in that, It was kind
At
of
School 18?
Yeah,
What part did you play?
I wouldn't know that.
You just remember being in a
I
play.
just know that we was on the stage, with it.
Was it at Christmas time, you think?
I think so,
Probably.
probably, yeah.
At Christmas play. So gosh, sixth grade, that would have been 1920, so 1925 you'd have been 10. Sixth grade would have been about 1926 or 27.
Yeah.
So what do you remember about the 1920s? Was there music that you remember that stands out?
Well, I remember when we got the first radio
Okay.
in
In your house?
our house, yeah.
What year would that have been?
That
Do
would
you-
have been probably 28, 27, 28.
27 or
We
28?
used a automobile battery for power for it, and stretched a big antenna up in the attic for it, so we could and listen to it. It had a speaker. It was an Atwater Kent radio, and it had a speaker that you could listen to it without headphones.
Oh, okay. So what do you remember about listening to the radio? Did you have your favorite stories?
Well, of course there was. Well, I remember the thing we got. They'd say, we got KDKA. I think it was the call letters or no WLS. No, that was Chicago. But you get the call letters, and we got Cincinnati. Got the station from Cincinnati. On that radio. That was something. And of course there was really nothing except maybe like a lot of music programs or anything like that then, it was just primarily
The news.
news, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember anything from the news reports? So go to 1928 when the crash of the stock market happened.
Yes,
Did that affect your family?
yes, it did.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, now that we moved then in about 1928 to Edgewood, see, and then I started going to Edgewood grade school, and I remember my dad came home from work, and he didn't lose his job, but his salary was cut in half.
Wow. Do you know what his salary was back
I
in
have
that
no
time?
idea.
Yeah, wasn't your business, was it?
No. We were very frugal. We had a garden, and mother did a lot of canning and did a lot of sewing, and was a wonderful seamstress.
So she made your clothes?
She made her clothes,
Yeah.
primarily, or at least kept them patched up for us. You didn't, it wasn't a thrill to have the knees are showing like they do nowadays when they they would be patched, and remember darning socks too, so did that for us. Okay.
What was your favorite meal that your mother made? When you knew Mom was cooking, you were excited. What was your favorite meal?
Probably fried chicken.
So what would she fix with fried chicken?
Oh, mashed potatoes,
Yeah.
green beans.
Did she have to kill the chicken?
Yeah, my dad killed the chicken, yes.
Was that sad for you as a kid, or just
No.
what it was? You were
No.
happy to have chicken.
Yeah, right.
You didn't become attached to him.
No,
So you went to Edgewood grade school then.
yeah,
So from 7th grade, 8th grade.
yeah.
Um,
And went to Southport High School, the old building. It's there by Southport Methodist Church on Southport Road, just east of Madison Avenue.
okay.
That's where the old Southport High School was. And they moved to the one there in Holmcroft, which was the
Now it's the administration building.
administration building.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about that, Betty, how nice they had that fixed up.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Wonderful.
and of course, went there then and graduated in 1933. If we're getting into high school now, at least I went to the one in after I graduated from Edgewood grade school. Then I went to Southport High School in Southport,
Right.
and then went to the one there in Holmcroft.
Okay, so you went to the both schools.
Yes.
So you started your freshman year at the old building there.
Yeah, and then went to in 1929. Then we went to the new high school.
New building. Okay. So what do you remember about high school? Were you in athletics? Were you academics? What was your
I was in plays in music and was in a play.
Do you remember what play you were in the high school? I know we're asking you to go back a long time.
Well,
I think we may have a program on that because,
Betty's probably have that.
but I don't know the name of it, but
I could.
But you had the lead part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had the lead part, like in probably the senior play.
It's
Oh.
it would be in the all what your pictures are what's
Oh, the cedar chest, you mean? In
no
the
no
cedar-
no no what you got from your class
Oh, you mean the anchor?
anchor, yeah, it would have been in the anchor.
So did you have a yearbook? Did they
Yes,
have the
called
Anchor
the
yearbook?
Anchor,
Because I
yes.
have an Anchor yearbook as well.
Yes,
Yeah, so who was your favorite teacher at the high school that you remember?
her name was that's Miss Kersey and Miss Hamilton.
Miss Kersey and Miss Hamilton.
And-
What did they teach?
English
English.
and business like
Accounting probably, and bookkeeping.
bookkeeping and I had typewriter. Learned use a typewriter. And there was a man teacher. His name was Doc. They called him. I don't know what his first name was, but they called him Doc Robbins. He was the algebra teacher,
Gotcha.
math teacher, I should say.
Do you remember having any childhood illnesses like measles and mumps and chicken pox?
Yeah, I had the whole.
Had the whole gamut.
Yeah,
Did
right.
you ever have polio?
No.
No polio. That's good. So you were born at home. We're going to kind of go backwards
Yes,
again.
right.
I know you were born at home, and your brother also was born at
Yes.
home. And did the doctors make house calls back when
Yes.
you were a child?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you remember the doctor coming to make a house call
Yeah.
when you were sick?
I remember going to his office, but I don't remember him coming to the house.
Right.
He had an office right there on Shelby Street, just south of the boulevard there, on the west side of Shelby Street. Dr. Stewart was his name.
Stewert.
Yeah,
Stewart? Well, that's pretty neat. So you graduated high school. Then what happened?
I couldn't find a job, and I went back and posted the entire year, next year. In 1930, graduated in 33 and posted the entire year in 1934.
So what does that mean, posted?
Went back to school again.
Oh.
Went back to high school.
So you did senior year twice.
Well, no, I took classes that would qualify me for college entrance.
Okay.
Took business, and I took care of the office. They had an office there for they ordered, we would call the commission houses downtown, and ordered stuff for the cafeteria in the high school, and they would give me what they wanted, and I would call them and order it for them.
That's cool. So so they had school lunch.
Oh yes,
What do you remember about school lunch at Southport?
very good.
Good.
Yes.
So then 1934, you posted at the high school. Then where did you get a job after that?
I worked with my dad's at the Central States Bridge place. But it was not a. The only way I know to tell you this, my dad was superintendent of the shop. And I worked there out in the shop, and I worked in a drafting room. I was learning how to be a draftsman,
Okay.
and developed all of their. We had a big vat there where we developed their blueprints for all of the different, and I did tracings for the different jobs and stuff. I had a desk that I had with the sheets of paper, and
Right.
and would do counts on like for rivets, how many, what
Right.
rivets,
For the bridges and such.
bridges and stuff like that, yeah.
Wow. So.
And then I left that and worked at Railroad Men's Savings and Loan, and that worked there up to the time we were married. I was still working there for them.
So.
It was a bank, like it was called the Railroad Men's Savings and Loan Association,
Right.
and it was on Virginia Avenue, just south of where the old Indiana National Bank was there at the point.
Yep. 722 Virginia Avenue.
Yeah.
So you went to work at Railroadman's. What did you do there? Were you a teller or a bank officer?
Just they had filing cabinets for all of the mortgage papers,
Right.
and I filed those in a cabinet and run errands for them.
So clerk.
Clerk, I was
Yeah.
a clerk, yeah.
So you met your wife. How did you meet your wife?
At church,
At church at
at
Edgewood.
Edgewood Methodist Church.
Right. So you got married. I take it her parents were okay with you marrying her?
Well, her parents were both deceased at the time that she was living with an aunt,
Okay.
and so
And what was her name, your wife?
Margaret
What was her last name?
Clayton.
Margaret Clayton. And so you got married. Take it you love her. What do you remember about your first date?
Well, we had what they called Epworth League, and I was president of the Epworth League, and we had a good group of young people at that time. Probably would have an average of maybe, oh, 30, 35 or 40 people on at Sunday evening for the young people's group, you know, called Epworth League. And then we would, there was a lady that her daughter was there too, and a part of the same group, and she lived across the street there from the church, and we'd go over there after church and play games, have hot chocolate or something after you had the church service on
Right.
Saturday evening. Yeah.
So, what kind of games did you play when you were on a date like that, or a youth group? What games did you play? Card games, board
No,
games,
just
charades?
just simple childhood games. Didn't amount to much from that standpoint.
Okay. So you met Margaret, and then you got married. Did you have a church wedding then?
Married in my parents' home, in my home.
Okay. And where was that address?
5635 Leonard Street. It was at that time. Manker was 5635 Manker.
It's still there too.
Yeah,
You got
And
married
we-
in the house.
we were married. We in the living room. We walked from the kitchen into the living room, and our minister, Reverend Robbins, married us there in front of the fireplace, and my home there, my home on Manker there.
And that was your parents' home?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Awesome. So then, how many children did you have?
2, had Betty, and then we had my son Donald.
Okay. 2 children. So when your wife had the children, were you in the delivery room?
No, they would not.
I knew the answer to that
They
one, but I just thought I'd
they
ask.
wouldn't let me in there.
Yeah. So she had them at the hospital. What hospital did she deliver?
Methodist.
At Methodist. Okay. So then you were still working. How long did you work for Railroadman's?
Probably. I don't
Where'd you retire from?
know. Oh, well,
Are you still working? Are you still working?
yeah.
Okay.
I take care of the kids. Well, I was in retail. When after I left Railroadman's,
So you worked at Lilly's.
I worked at the post office as a clerk. I had
Okay.
taken the examination for to either be a clerk or a courier, and I worked as a clerk in the downtown post office.
Wow.
And I worked there for a while, and then resigned from the post office, and went to work at Ellis Ayres.
Oh, you went to Lilly first,
I I worked at Eli Lilly
during the war.
during the war.
You worked. at
Okay,
Lilly.
so yeah, tell me about wartime. I know you have a draft registration, or everybody had to register. Is
Yes.
that- so you registered for war.
I registered for the war and had my examination and was ready to be called up, and they declared VJ Day. And so I,
Victory.
because of her and my job at Lily's, I was exempt.
Okay. Since you had a daughter and you had
Yeah.
a job at Lily's.
Yes.
What did Lily's do during the war? What was their wartime effort?
Well, it's primarily, pharmaceutical business of medication and so forth.
And sending that to the
Yeah.
war front.
Now I worked. What I did there, I worked in what they call the shipping department. As you would have shipping orders that was shipped, and export shipping went to countries like Colombia, South America, and different places, and you had to have a customs person inspect those shipments,
Right.
and you you had to try to watch the weights of what you put in there, so you had different size containers that they put them in and sealed them up and
Right.
metal tapes to fix it over and all that kind of stuff, getting it ready for shipping.
Did any of your friends go overseas and not come home? People that you knew?
No, but of course, getting back to Edgewood Methodist Church, I sang in a gospel quartet
Uh-huh.
out of Edgewood Methodist Church for years. We sang all over central Indiana.
What was the quartet's name?
Mission Airs.
Missionaires.
Mission, A-I-R-E-S. Mission Airs.
Okay. Oh, missionaires. Okay, got it.
Singing airs, gospel song, on a mission for the Lord, singing airs or gospel songs for the Lord. We sang in churches all over. You mentioned Edmund Ray. We sang there at Edmund Ray. We sang when Youth for Christ was going. We sang a lot of times for the Youth for Christ services in the old Roberts Park Church
Right.
and downtown and then up on North Marina Street. They were up on Marina Street, a building up there about 20th and Meridian, Youth for Christ.
Well, let me ask you, do you remember asking Jesus into your heart? Do you remember
Yes,
when you
ma'am.
became a Christian? Can you tell me about that?
Well, it was in a revival meeting. We had that the other day, Betty.
Yes, we did.
December the 9th, 1934. 1934.
So how old would you have been?
He was
Well,
19.
19 years old?
17.
17, 18, 19, yeah. And you remember asking Jesus into your heart and
Yes,
becoming a
I did.
Christian? That's awesome. Do you remember who the revival minister was?
His name was Massey.
Reverend Massey. So was he a visiting pastor?
He's a visiting pastor, yes, doctor.
Dr. Massey. That's really cool. So you've been a Christian pretty much your whole life.
That's right.
And you were raised in the church as a child.
Yes.
Yeah.
And baptized at Park Place Methodist Church.
Was it a full immersion?
No,
Just
sprinkle.
sprinkles, yeah. Because us Methodists, we don't want to get wet.
Well, I had a story about that. Reverend Lindstrom was a pastor at Southport Baptist Church, and my pastor, Reverend Robbins, were friendly and would help one another out there once in a while. So Reverend Lindstrom was telling them one time, said that they were talking about the Methodist Church, said, well, 10 drops of rain will keep 100 Methodists away,
That's funny. So when you went to church, did your family sit in the front row, the middle row, or the back row?
About the middle.
About the middle?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you go back to your household when you were a child. What kind of appliances did you have in your house? So what was your refrigerator when you were a child?
A regular icebox.
Icebox. Do you remember the Iceman coming?
Yes.
And what do you remember about the Iceman?
Well, he had the ice hooks that he would and we put a sign in the window if you wanted 25 pounds of ice, and he had his hooks that he would bring that chunk of ice up and put it in the ice box for us, and they always had to chip a little piece of ice off and give it to us, so had to have that.
And what do you remember about your mom's washing machine? Did she have a washing machine, or
Yeah.
did she?
Just a wringer washer,
Wringer washer?
Maytag wringer washer.
She did. You don't remember her using a washboard?
Yes,
You did when you were younger, probably.
yes.
So how did she do that? Did she just have a bucket and a washboard, or?
Well, just a wash tub and a washboard, yeah.
And indoor plumbing? Did you have?
Yes, we did have indoor plumbing.
Oh, your whole life. Awesome.
Not necessarily, but we did have.
Right. So you don't remember having to use an outhouses?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. In your city house on Olive?
No, it was after Morgan and I were married, and we lived over on Bluff Road where the gardeners are over there.
Uh-huh.
And that they had an outhouse there for us. you know.
Okay. So, what was your dad's first car? Do you remember your dad having a car?
Yes. Well, we had about a 19, I don't know what he had prior to that, but we had about a 1920 Dodge touring car, and we went to visit his sister, my aunt and uncle, in Kansas,
Oh, wow.
and drove. My aunt and uncle went with us. We went in an open Dodge touring car, and went out there at Olathe, Kansas, to visit them, and Highway 40 was nothing but a dirt road. We got out into Missouri there, and it rained like it had been doing here, and there was just ruts where the car went, and it took us 8 hours to go 48 miles on
Oh,
Highway
my
40.
gosh.
And you were saying how bad your dad's
My
shoulders?
dad wrestling that string wheel. He had big knots on both shoulder blades from wrestling that. We would camp along the side of the road.
Just pitch a tent?
Yeah, pup tent.
And your mom cooked, you just brought food, or did you buy food along the way?
Well, I don't remember cooking too much along the side of the road, but we camped overnight.
Right, right. Well, that's really cool. So, how many people fit in the car?
Well, it was my brother and I, and my dad and mother, that's 4, and my aunt and uncle, that's 6.
And it was comfortable.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
you didn't have seat belts, and you
No,
didn't.
no.
Yeah. So 3 in the front and 3 in the back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What was your first car that you bought as an adult?
Had a Model T, 1926 Model T Ford.
And you bought that when you were how old?
Oh, I was working, and I guess I bought it from my dad had it, and then he sold it to me for $25,
$25.
and I drove it, and then then I had got a Model A, 1930 Model A, and I went from that to a Model B, which was still a 4-cylinder,
Right.
but that's what I had when Margaret and I was married, was that Model B Ford.
So did they start with keys? How did you start it?
Well,
So the touring car, how did your
touring
dad
car,
start
I
the
think
touring?
it probably had a starter in it. I can't really tell you. I don't know.
Okay.
I know we had to crank them a lot of times to try to get them started.
Yeah,
you know.
that's kind of what I was thinking. There wasn't
Yeah.
a key to turn. You had to crank it to
Yeah.
get it going.
Yeah.
And then your Model A, did it have a crank or?
No, it had a starter.
Okay. Okay.
And had a rumble, a 1928 Model A Ford Coupe with a rumble seat.
A rumble seat. Well, there
Yeah.
you go. You were dashing.
Yes, he was, wasn't he?
So how much was your first paycheck that you remember getting besides the newspapers? We'll go on at your first
when I
job.
went to work at Railroad Men's, $12 a week.
$12 a week. Do you know what the cost of living was then? I mean, you made $12 a week. Was that good or was it low?
No, I wouldn't say it was good, but it was all that was available. I worked for those gardeners over there on Bluff Road for $1 a day
Oh, wow.
from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night
As a child?
as a child, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. Do you remember which gardeners? Do you remember what their names?
Groovy.
The Groovies, okay. So how did you get groceries as a child? Did your parents pay cash? Did they have an account?
Frank Koska grocery store at Epler Avenue and Epler and Madison Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Frank Koska grocery, and they would run a bill.
And I can't, yeah.
Then my dad we would go over there when he would pay that grocery bill, and Mr. Koski would always, we wanted the kids to be there because he'd always give us a little sack of candy when my dad paid his bill. And there's a fellow by the name of Kistner that worked there at Koski's, and he would a lot of times he'd come to your home and write down what my mother wanted, you know.
Right.
And
Koski's Grocery. Haven't heard of that one. So,
Frank Koski was the ones that started the Indianapolis Olympian. He had a baseball team, and he had a basketball team, and well, shoot. A basketball player from Martinsville that he played for Koski's.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Oh,
The fellow that was such a
real
good.
famous basketball
The
coach.
famous basketball coach
oh,
from Martinsville.
Bird?
He was, he became UCLA's coach and was
Yeah.
their coach for years and years and years.
We can figure that out.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
don't
can't
know.
think of his name right this minute.
A Martinsville basketball player, and he became the UCLA coach.
Yes.
And
He
he played
played
for Koski's basketball.
For Koski's, that was
So where did his teams play?
different gyms.
Okay.
There was teams like Fort Wayne Pistons,
Okay.
Zollner Pistons, I think it was, and they played teams in Detroit, and then they.
So kind of our city's first professional kind of basketball.
Yes, it was the first. They were called the Olympians, and then went to the Pacers.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty cool. So you were back in the beginnings of all of that.
Yes.
So what do you remember about, so we'll go back to the times. Was your parents politically active at all? Did they vote?
Republican, yes.
Okay. Do you remember if your mother was a suffragette? Was she the women got the right to vote in 1919? You would have been 4 years old when women
Well-
got the right to vote. So do you remember your mom being a voter? Was she active in voting?
Well, yeah. Of course, she was active in schools with the PTA too.
Okay. But you don't remember if she was a suffragette or
No.
anything like that. Do you remember what's the first president you remember? That whether from over the news or
Coolidge.
Coolidge?
Yeah. And then Hoover.
Right. Who was your first presidential vote when you were first able to vote?
Would have been Hoover.
Hoover? Okay. So you registered to vote. Did you have to register to vote back then?
I think so.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you have to have a driver's license when you first started driving? You know, now you have to go get a driver's license. Did you have to have a driver's license or you just
I think we just started driving.
driving? Yeah.
I don't remember having a driver's license.
How old were you think you were when you first started driving?
About 16.
16, okay. So back to the time. So we talked about the Depression a little bit, and you just did what you did. You didn't really know it was the Depression necessarily. They didn't call it that then. World War II, kind of touched on that. Do you remember much of the sacrifices your family had to make during wartime? What do you remember about the sacrifices that just citizens had to do during wartime?
Oh, the
Well, of course,
tokens.
everything was rations, your
Yeah.
sugar, shoes, your automobile tires, gasoline was all rations.
And you were an adult then, so
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, tell them the story about you going and getting me during the war.
Oh,
Yeah, what happened with that and the rationing and everything.
well, but like all this rain now, she was visiting with an aunt in Lyons, Indiana.
Okay. And
And
she would be Betty, your daughter.
yes,
Well, my
Yeah.
mom was with me too.
Okay.
she was with her aunt and uncle down there. And she was in bed and she got a bobby pin and she swallowed it.
Oh.
And they felt that we needed to get her back home. But I had the car, but I didn't have any gasoline. And I went to the rationing office in Fountain Square and told them that I needed to get down there and get her. And they gave me enough gas stamps that I could get down there and get her. And White River was a flood stage all the way along White River down to Paragon and down to Gosport and Worthington and clear on down to Lyons and back. It was clear up almost to the road before we got her back. We got her to the family doctor, and he told her to eat mashed potatoes and
For mother to put a little bit of cotton in the mashed potatoes, so it would entwine itself around the bobby pin,
Huh.
and
because they weren't coated back then, you know, the
Right.
bobby pins weren't coated.
so fortunately she got along with it and actually passed the
Wow.
bobby pin all right. So we got that taken care of.
Well, and that was very scary because, see, it could have,
Perforated your
Yeah.
stomach. Yeah.
yeah,
How
Wow.
old would you have been, Betty, when that?
I think it was about 3 or 4,
Yeah,
because I remember it.
yeah.
Therefore. So tell me about the rationing coupons. So every family got a book of coupons, right? And so how did that work?
Well, you didn't get it unless you had the rationing booklet.
And so you would go to the store and you would have, so the rationing booklet was for sugar, milk, and what did you get the coupons? Explain the coupon system that you remember.
Now that I don't know.
And if you don't remember, that's okay. So like to get shoes, you would get a coupon
Get
for
shoes.
So how many
and
pairs of shoes could you get? Just one?
Just one pair of shoes.
One
yeah.
pair of shoes.
And automobile tires were rationed. Gasoline was rationed.
Why was sugar rationed?
It was a
I'm just curious.
commodity that was, and they had beet sugar instead of cane sugar
Oh,
during the war. Sugar beets, it was farmers that raised beets and they could make sugar out of what they called the sugar beets.
right. Huh.
But, well, all the different, that meat, all rationed the meat too.
So a lot of times you ate out of your gardens then.
Yes, right.
Everybody had a garden.
Yes,
Yeah. So your wife was a good gardener
Yes, she
and
was.
probably a good cook.
yes,
She was.
excellent, yes.
What is your favorite meal you remember Margaret making?
She made a lot of good ones, didn't she?
Yeah,
She was a very good cook.
coconut cream pie would be one of them.
Coconut cream pie. Oh, there you go. Probably homemade from scratch.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
She made the best crust. Oh my goodness.
Okay. So, let's see. Talked about World War II. So famous people. Do you remember John Dillinger?
Yes,
What do you remember about John Dillinger?
he lived in Mooresville, Indiana, and he was robbed banks.
Yeah, he robbed a bank up there in Fountain Square.
Yeah, and they had a neighbor that had him tracked down when they caught him there with that bunch in Chicago, and he's buried in Crown Hill Cemetery, just around the corner from where my grandparents are buried.
Oh wow. That's pretty. So you never ran into John Dillinger.
I didn't, but this neighbor did.
Your neighbor did.
Yes.
What was his name?
chief.
Was he a police officer, or he just
He was an insurance man.
insurance man? Okay. So let me ask,
Huntington.
Huntington.
Mhm.
And so he was your neighbor where?
They lived on Epler Avenue, right there by Manker,
Okay.
and
What do you remember about Amelia Earhart and her first flight? You're a boy, so you may not remember much about Amelia.
well, of course, I know she made a flight from across the continental United States.
Right.
I knew that.
What do you remember about John Lindbergh and the Lindbergh kidnapping?
Well,
That would have been 1932, the kidnapping.
Hoffman was the man that killed him,
Right.
and
That was Bruno Hoffman, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. What do you remember about the Kennedy assassination? Where were you at on the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
I was on the 8th floor of L.S. Ayers and Company, and it was on television and showed the actual shot where the car was when it's being shot.
Oh, wow.
Because we had television on, and it came on and showed that of him being shot.
Yeah. It was a shock, wasn't it,
Yes.
to see that? Tell me about getting your first television. When did you get your first television?
Well, I sold some of the I don't know what year it would have been.
Early 50s.
Probably.
Very early 50s. Because Dad worked, when he was on the eighth floor there at Ayers, he was working in the appliance department there.
Okay.
So he was one of the first, him and his other salespeople were one of the first to sell stereos, TVs, and we were one of the first families that had a color TV because of him working in the appliance department.
Well, you were
And
fancy.
so that would have been like in the early 50s, and
Yeah.
he and then he would make calls to people that he sold TVs to, because they would call and say, well, the picture's not coming in very good.
Well,
And he would go to these people's homes and fine tune their TV.
try to get a picture out of rabbit ears. They're called rabbit ears, you know.
Yeah, I remember you used to have to stand and hold it and get
Yeah.
it just right.
Put a blooming foil on them or anything. And this is a fact when the television, if snow was on the roof or leaves would come out, it would affect the signal, see?
Huh.
So you wouldn't get a very good picture. I was in an apartment with a lady at 16th and Pennsylvania,
Right.
across from Heron's School, Art School, and I went there, and she was having what we call snow, had a terrible picture, you know.
Right.
And so I said, you go in there, here she is, had her TV sitting there, and I said, because it was right in front of where the refrigerator was in the kitchen. I said, could we switch that where you had your lamp table and the TV, just switch those two and move that TV a little bit. We moved it probably no more than 4 or 5 feet, and ended up getting her picture where before the TV, the refrigerator blocked the signal and she wasn't getting the signal. See? So that actually happened. Yeah.
That's funny. So you worked at Ayers. How did you get downtown? Do you remember the trolley system in Fountain
I
Square?
rode what they call I drove most of the time downtown,
Right.
yeah.
But do you remember the trolleys in Fountain Square?
Oh my, yes.
What do you remember about the trolleys?
Well, one thing that is true that my mother and I, you could get on at below Troy Avenue and Shelby Street. There, that was the end of the Shelby streetcar line. Of
Right.
course, the interurban came down Madison Avenue and went clear to Louisville, you know.
Oh gosh, I didn't know it went to Louisville.
Yes, going Greenwood, Franklin, Columbus, Jeffersonville, Louisville.
Yeah.
So, but we went up there, and you could take the Shelby Street streetcar, and then you'd get there, and you could go all the way to Broad Ripple.
Wow.
You could get your transfers and go from one line to another, and we went all the way to Broad Ripple. And then we got an Illinois car and went back. What we did, we walked from Broad Ripple to Butler Fieldhouse, Butler.
Hinkle.
Well, the grounds for Butler,
Right.
and came up for the canal goes through there, and got on the Illinois car and went right back down and got off at the end of the line there at Shelby Street.
Huh.
Walked all the way along the canal from Broad Ripple to Butler.
Wow.
That was interesting.
That is. So, let's see. Any other questions that you can think of? So, Fountain Square. I know that there was movie houses in Fountain
Yes.
Square. What do you remember about the movie houses or Fountain Square in general?
Well, of course, the Fountain Square Theater was a wonderful theater. Had lights in the ceiling of the auditorium, and had a pipe organ there in the theater.
Pipe organ, yeah.
And I actually rode my bicycle up there when the Fountain Square Theater was being built.
Wow.
Then they had the Granada, which is over there on the west side of Virginia Avenue, and McCroy's Dime Store and Granada Theater there. That was the first movie. So I was in that Granada Theater with
Do you remember what movie that was?
Al Jolson and was Hedy Lamarr.
Al Jolson and Hedy Lamarr. Who was your favorite movie stars when you were a child? Who was your hero, we'll say, as a kid? Who did you want to be
I don't know if I really had any.
when you were a little kid?
Probably Tom Mix, I suppose, as much as anybody.
What did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, what did you think? I want to be what?
Well, I'll tell you what, with as tight as jobs were, you didn't go into a place thinking you was going to make a career out of it. You was just thankful to get a job, just like when I worked with their Central States learning to be a draftsman. Yes, that would have been a good profession, but my dad, see, they would have jobs in the winter, in the summer, like now, it's starting up, but in the wintertime, the shop would be shut down, you'd be laid off, see.
Right. Now,
And-
was he in a union?
And my dad said, if you can get a job someplace else, he said, I'd recommend that you do that. Well, then I left there, just quit there, because it was just part-time anyway, you know.
Right. Yeah, and that was right in the middle of the Depression.
And then went to work there at Railroad Bands, and of course, and just go on from there, just from one job to another, just trying to make a living, which is
That's a lot.
something else.
What do you remember about the day Pearl Harbor got bombed? Where were you at on that day? Do you remember?
On Bluff Road, we had a Crosley radio, and we was listening to it, and they said, came on and said that Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
Yeah. What did you think? I mean, what was your first thoughts?
Well, I knew that we was at war. I knew that right away,
Right. Yeah. 'Cause that's the first time America has been attacked.
Yes, right.
So your patriotism and were people patriotic back then?
Oh, yes.
That was
yes.
yeah. They stood for the flag and
Yes.
yeah. What about Cowboys and Indians? Did you like Cowboys and Indians as a kid?
Well, I'm getting into a lot of the ancient history here. See, I was involved with the Scouts,
Okay.
and
So you were a Boy Scout?
yeah.
Tell me about Boy Scouts.
Well, of course, you have the different tenderfoot and second class, first class,
All right.
and
So what age were you when you started Boy Scouts?
probably about 14.
14. Okay. So tell me about being a Boy Scout.
Well, we had the scout troop was my dad and some of the parents from Edgewood Methodist Church helped start the scout troop there, and it was Troop 96, and it was at Edgewood Methodist Church, and then we had Mr. Koski had some property there on Buck Creek, which is that's Edgewood Avenue and Buck Creek. And he had some property there, and we had a big festival and everything, and raised some money and built a scout hut there on that property,
Right.
and met there for several years.
Wow. My boys were in Troop 96 at
Yeah.
Edgewood United Methodist.
Yeah.
They
So
were
that-
Cub Scouts there.
Yeah,
So your dad helped start that troop.
yeah.
Did you get your eagle?
No,
No?
I dropped out of that after his,
Couple years.
well, when you're working, trying to make a living, it's,
Yeah. That makes it difficult.
yeah,
So, did you take piano lessons?
yes.
And who was your piano teacher? Do you remember?
I don't know what her name was, but she lived on Shelby Street there, just right there by the boulevard. And I was probably about 6 years old, went over there and started taking lessons.
What was your favorite songs to play?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
little tunes that she would pick out that you would learn to play,
Right. What was Valentine's Day like when you were a kid? Did you have parties at your school?
Oh, yeah.
Or tell me about Valentine's Day when you were in 3rd or 4th grade. So at School 18. What do you remember about Valentine's?
Well, I think I assume we probably gave Valentine's to our classmates, but that's about all I could remember, and that'd be about it, I guess.
What about in high school? Did you have dances in high school that you went to? And
What?
dances in high school?
Oh my, yes, dances,
Yeah. Did you have a prom?
yes.
So who did you take to the prom in high school? Do you remember?
Well, yeah, classmate. That's
Just a girl.
just a girl. Yeah.
He's not giving any names. You don't kiss and tell, do you?
No.
Okay, tell me about the Indy 500 race. What do you remember about the Indy 500?
Oh my.
Oh, he's got lots of information.
Oh, let's hear
about
some
that.
Indy 500 information.
Well, now this is really something because the Raider family and my mother's brother, Willard, it's Willard Big Boy Raider. He was the first man that ever went 100 miles an hour at the Speedway.
Wow.
He drove test cars for Packard and for Silvertown cars. I mean, the tires tested them.
Is that your uncle?
My uncle.
Wow.
And he drove this race car, test car that Packard had, as a 12-cylinder car in 1914, and they were Eddie Rickenbacker and all those old time Tommy Milton, all those old timers were there at that Ralph De Palma. Those
So did you go to the race?
Earl Cooper. And he later left Packard and went. He was in to Cadillac, and he was in charge of the experimental department because of his connection with the track. He was in charge of the experimental department at Cadillac, if you can believe that, and never even had I don't know, they even finished high school education, but
Wow.
he did that. And then anytime there was a General Motors car selected to pace the race, he was, because of him being a former driver there, see, he drove in the race.
Okay, so he was an actual race car driver.
Yes.
Wow.
And so he paced the race in 1927 with a LaSalle, and again in, I think it was 32 with a Cadillac, and again in 37 with a LaSalle. So there's all kinds of information.
Did you know anything about the Chevrolet brothers?
No.
No. Did you guys go to the race then?
Yes.
Did you?
We went with, he was down, going, taking us, he took us out to the track, and of course they had all kinds of restrictions, but he was a big, very big man, and very
Oh, he was really tall.
tall, and somewhat domineering in his actions and appearances, And we were there, and my cousin and I were with him, and we walked up to the gates there where the garages were, and the guard said, they can't go in, we don't allow boys and children in here, so, because of the restrictions in the garage area,
Right.
He said, he just stood up real tall like this, and he said, they're with me. And we walked right on in there and went to the different garages and everything. That was really something.
Yeah, no doubt. Did you know Dutch Bauman, the driver, but Dutch Bauman?
No.
No. Tell me about 4th of July and parades. What do you remember about 4th of July as a child?
Well, they would have parades downtown Indianapolis on the Circle,
Okay.
and you'd go down there and have a parade, and
Did you go as children?
yeah.
And did you wave flags? Did they have fireworks? What did you?
No, I think if we did anything at all, just had a small American flag and waved it probably.
Right. The Christmas. Tell me about Christmas at home when you were a child. What did you get for a Christmas present as a child
Well,
that you remember?
my first electric train, I guess I figured that.
Well, that was pretty nice.
Wow.
How old would you have been when you got your first electric train?
Probably about 9 or 10.
9 or 10. So you had a Christmas tree, a traditional Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Did your mom put icicles on it?
Yes.
Yeah. I still put icicles on my tree. Drives my kids crazy. Let's see. So you got a train. Did you go see Santa?
I suppose we did, yeah.
Yeah, you don't remember going to see Santa. What about airs at Christmas time?
Oh, well, that's...
That was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Had those windows, and they had the mezzanine there, and we would, different ones in the store would go there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and sing Christmas carols from the balcony there,
Wow.
Mhm.
and
Oh, it was like magic.
I have no doubt.
It's decorated
It was
so beautifully,
absolutely
you know.
like magic. Yeah.
just,
I remember the windows downtown
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
electric things in the windows.
Right.
well, it had airs and of course
Blocks.
Blocks and Strausses and Charlie Meyer and all those places had decorations for Christmas, you know.
Do you remember GC Murphy's in Fountain Square, the Murphy
Yes.
store?
Yes.
Did you shop there with your
Yes.
mom as
Yes.
a child? Yeah. Trying to think what else was in Fountain.
Well, they had shoe stores there at Fountain Square, and I remember getting my first pair of high top shoes, and they had on the side of the high top boot. They had a little pocket with a pocket knife in it. That was a big deal getting that pocket knife.
How old would you have been?
Oh, probably 10, 11.
10 or 11, yeah.
Yeah,
Getting a pocket knife.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, any other questions you can think of?
Oh, he touched the cherub. He's actually seen
Oh,
the
yeah.
cherub and touched the cherub.
Now,
That's
the-
blocks now, right?
No, it's
Ayers, okay, the Ayers
Cherub
cherub.
at Ayers, when I was working there in a store. See, before I was selling television, I was what they called a section manager.
Okay.
And I had the entire southeast section of Ayers. If you remember how Ayers store was, the main floor, first floor of Ayers, I took care of that whole section.
Wow.
I had hosiery, stationery, the Max Factor booth, candy, pharmacy, and then on the mezzanine we had optical and sheet music. And I had to take care of the responsibility of caring for all of that.
Wow.
Uh,
So, how did you get to touch the cherub?
well, they put the cherub there in the, above the clock at Thanksgiving.
Right.
And it stayed there until Christmas Eve. And where the beauty shop was there on the 8th floor, that's right, went to the corner of Illinois, of Marion and Washington, where
Right.
Ayers clock was. And so the cherub, they lifted it up off of the clock and put it in the room there in the beauty shop till they could store it again, see. So it was there, and I actually touched it.
What other stories have you told over the years?
Oh gosh, I don't know. He's hit a lot of them. That's for sure. He's hit a
Yeah.
lot of them. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I was glad you talked about the race and all that. And then, and well, the TVs, because of the fact that he was one of the first people,
Right,
really,
right.
that had a TV, that he was one of the first ones in the neighborhood that had a color TV, and back
Okay, your
then-
house was all the rage, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
oh my
Everybody come down to see the TV.
New
They-
Year's
they all-
Day,
On New Year's Day, when they knew it was going to be televised in color, and we
and
had,
the parade, the Rose Parade.
Right.
yeah, we had invited them in, and
We'd have a whole house full of people.
yeah, watched
His brother and their family and neighbors and all that. I mean, the family room would be full of people watching
Oh,
the
to see the amazing roses and the
yes,
color and
yes.
Yeah.
And everybody would just marvel because he always had his tuned in so well.
right.
That the color was always just beautiful. Just perfect.
How
What
big
do you-
was the screen?
It was probably it was sort of octagon shape, wasn't it, Dad?
So what about 8 inches
Probably
by
about-
the screen?
oh, it's a 19-inch
Okay.
color.
Yeah.
19 inches.
Weighed a ton, had about 50 tubes in it.
Well, let me ask you. So, what about photography and photos? Did you ever have a camera
Yes.
Oh,
as a
yes.
child?
Yes.
Tell me
Yes.
about that.
My camera?
What was your first camera like?
Well, we had a Kodak box camera.
Wow. So, what year would that have been? Do you know?
But when Mother had it, and all those pictures, like I seen a picture of that touring car, that Dodge touring car, it's down in my room down there. But anyway, then we went from that to we had an Essex, and my dad had a Hudson touring car.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
But cameras? Did your
cameras,
family
yeah.
take a lot of pictures?
Yes, Argus C3, 35 millimeter camera.
Wow.
and he took a
took a
lot of
lot of
nice
pictures of that.
pictures.
Down
Beautiful pictures.
Down the Smokies and Hawaii when I went to Hawaii.
So where all have you traveled to? You've been to the Smokies. You've been to Hawaii. Where else have you been?
Florida.
Florida,
Florida a lot.
a lot.
Washington D.C.
Washington D.C.
Yeah.
So you saw the White House.
Yeah.
Who was the president when you saw?
New York City, of course. What was it, honey?
Let's see. I was trying to think. Eisenhower would have been president then, right? When we went to New York,
Yeah.
Eisenhower would have been
To
president.
Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Washington probably. Yeah,
Went
because
in-
that was all sort of
Went to
together
New York World's Fair.
Oh wow.
in '64. Or no, you went in '65.
Yeah.
We went in '64.
Yes.
You went in '65. Yeah. And
You've seen a lot of innovation
oh,
in your
Yeah.
time.
In
What
part.
would you say is the biggest thing that has come about in your lifetime that you think has changed the world the most? What would you say?
Television.
Television? What's your favorite TV shows that you watch today?
I like Jeopardy.
Okay. What was your favorite TV show, gosh, say 50 years ago, halfway through your life? What would have been?
Bonanza.
Yeah.
You love Bonanza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been one. We'd watch that every Sunday night, you know.
Mm-hmm. What were Sundays like when you were a child? You go to church, but then what would you do in the afternoons? Did you go visit people or?
Yeah.
Just visit a lot of people.
Or he'd take us for a ride.
Yeah.
Him and Mom loved to take us, just get in, the car and just go for a nice
Go
little
for a
ride.
drive.
And
Mhm.
Well, we skipped a whole big section that in the 20s, my dad and were his connection with the his job.
Uh-huh.
There was a man in Brown County. His name was Exner, that drove. He worked in the he was a draftsman. He was originally from Germany, and he was in the draftsman there at the bridge works. He had owned property there south of Nashville.
Okay.
So he had an original log cabin there that he talked to my dad about buying it. So my dad bought that property, and as kids when we was 10, 11, 12 years old, 14, 15 on up into the teens,
Right.
we would go, my mother and my brother and I would go down there, and we would stay in that cabin, and my dad would come down on weekends. And of course, you'd go down, you couldn't get down to there, was just a rut road up over from Bean Blossom on up that way. You couldn't get on down to Nashville, where you would go. 31 was a brick road, and you went to Columbus and then over to Nashville. See,
Right, down 46
that way.
there. So what was the cabin like? Tell me about your log.
the original log cabin.
So no electricity.
No,
So you used what? Candles or
yeah, just a coal lamp. Yeah.
coal oil lamp? So did
But
you?
we'd stay down there in the summertime and tromped all over the state park there before they ever even made it a state park. See.
So you remember Brown County State Park coming into being?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Do you remember about where the property was that you guys were at?
yes.
Where? So on 135
No,
or?
it was on 46, just about 3 miles south of Nashville, close to the south entrance to the state park.
Okay.
Now,
or that
The west entrance?
entrance, yeah.
west entrance, yes.
We have a cabin in Bean Blossom.
Okay.
We have a log cabin. Ours isn't quite that old though.
Yeah.
Ours was built
Well,
in 1986.
Unfortunately, it changed hands and as years went by, and then it was caught on fire and burnt down, so it's not even there anymore.
That's too bad. But Exner. Was
Bill
the-
Exner,
Bill Exner.
he had the telephone company there at Nashville, and then he also was a ticket taker at the entrance to the Brown County State Park.
Right. That's fun. So your memories are fond of Nashville. What do you remember Nashville, the village, being like when you used to go?
Well,
Wasn't much.
we would walk from that cabin to Nashville. There was Calvin had a hardware store that we would get things that Dad needed to work as a on the cabin, you know.
Right. You remember
And-
the Hobnob?
And Mobley's were there, and
Hobnob was there because you'd get your ice cream there.
yeah, Miller's drugstore was on the corner of 46 and there across from the courthouse.
Right.
And we'd walk down into Nashville and get us an ice cream cone for a nickel, you know.
That was something.
Yeah, and we would get go hiking. My mother loved she got caught in a forest fire there up on a town hill, which is just south end of Nashville. As you go on
Right.
south there, as there was a forest fire there.
How'd
And,
she get caught in that?
They were this Mrs. Exner and her was hiking, and the wind changed, and
Wow.
they were able to get out of it, but
Wow,
they
I didn't know about that either.
yeah, caught it. They were in the,
Disaster
they
seemed to follow your mother a little bit,
Yeah,
didn't it?
yeah.
The flood,
Oh,
the
yeah,
forest fire.
yeah.
Did she court disaster?
Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah, the wind changed and you can get caught
Yeah.
real quick.
You could, that's right.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, tell me about your being in the Masons. When did you join the Masonic Lodge? And what lodge did you start in?
Southport Lodge,
Okay.
270, which is just south of Epler on 31,
And do you remember when you joined?
1938.
1938. Ooh.
And my dad was master of the lodge at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, his dad's pictures in they're in the lodge because
Right.
of the fact that he was master of the lodge.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you were in the lodge, and then what things have you done through the Masonic?
Sang in the Scottish Rite Chorus
Oh, there you go.
downtown.
Scottish Rite is beautiful.
Oh, yes,
Beautiful building.
it is.
I used to work at the Shrine Club, the
Yeah.
Marat Shrine Temple. I used to tell people I worked in the temple, but I was a waitress. So,
I'm now beyond 75-year Mason as
wow.
from Southport Lodge, and
Yeah, because, gosh, are you close to the 80th now? Because
probably pretty
I
close.
was gonna say, it's been at least 4 years ago when
Yeah.
you went in for the 75th. Well, you went in 1938,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you
so
are.
your 80th would have been last year then, is that right?
You should get a certificate.
Yeah.
I have.
because-
I've got the 75-year pin.
Yeah,
and
he's got the
certificate.
75-year pin.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'd guess you're probably the oldest Mason still living, at least in this area, for sure.
Well, I'm the oldest resident here at the home.
Yeah.
So
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. And your dad was in as well. How do you like living here at the home?
it's marvelous.
It is. What's your favorite activity that you do here?
Well, I sing in the choir.
You still sing in the choir.
Yeah.
Sing me a song. What's your favorite song that you sing?
It is no secret what God can do. What He's done for others, He'll do for you. With arms wide open, He'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do.
Awesome. Do you remember your school fight song? At
Hail to Southport High, that orange voice does ring. She can tell you about that. Now that Southport history, if you want that.
I do.
The lady that was my classmate, Doris Shannon was her name,
Okay.
and she composed the fight song for Southport.
And she was your classmate.
She was my classmate in 1933.
So when did she compose that? When you were in school still?
Yeah, in the class, music class, in the 30s.
So your school class was one of the first to sing that song.
Yes, right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So graduation, did you have black gowns or did you have caps and gowns when you graduated?
We had cap and gowns, but I can't tell you what color they were. I think they were probably kind of like blue color.
Okay. Were the colors red and white then? The
Yes,
school colors, and you were
Yeah.
Cardinals?
yes.
Southport Cardinals, yeah. Rock on.
And
I graduated in class of 79.
She's
a little
got-
farther out.
see, we got a record there that hailed to Southport High, and she's got it. In fact, I have it, and then she
Well, our class, now this is sort of interesting.
Why don't
I-
you come
I
over
went to-
here and talk so you're on camera?
Oh, no, I don't want to do that, but, I went to Edgewood, and we were the last class that went through the 7th grade at Edgewood, okay? All right, then Perry Junior High was the 8th and 9th.
Right.
So in other words, your freshman year, they always just said it was the 9th, you know, they didn't even say that it was the freshman year, you know, but it was, obviously, it was so our 8th and 9th grade, we went to Perry Junior High, which is where the high school is now.
Right.
Okay, so then our sophomore, junior year, we went over to the administration building, what is the administration building now.
Correct.
And so our sophomore, junior year, we went there because they were in the process of switching everything over and Southport High
To
School
the
become-
new high school.
to the new high school and the new field house.
Right.
And the field house, you know, was dedicated like in 58, like right at the beginning of the basketball season, I think is about when that was dedicated. Okay. And I worked for one of the guys in the office that was sort of in charge of that being built. And, you know, you could just look right out past the football stadium and see, you know, all that iron and, you know, everything being built there for the field house. Okay, so then our senior year, I graduated in 59. So our senior year, we went from the old building to the new high school. And at that point, they had a swimming pool too, because they put in a swimming pool. And, and the new field house and all that. And we were the first class to graduate from the school where it is now.
Awesome.
But I mean, look at all those changes that we went
Exactly.
through as our class, you
That
know,
is crazy.
last of the 7th grade, you know, of course, and they didn't do, and then once we went to the junior high, you didn't have an 8th grade graduation, you know, or
Right.
anything like they used to do.
The basketball player is Johnny Wooden.
Oh
Johnny
yeah,
Wooden.
that's who it was, Johnny
Johnny
Wooden.
Wooden.
I kept thinking, oh my gosh, he's so famous, why can I not think of his name? Yeah, Johnny Wooden. And, but you know, to go from there, then 2 years as 8th and 9th grade, then to go over to the old building for our
You did a lot
sophomore,
of
junior
moving for
later,
never moving.
and then back to the high school and be the first class to graduate from the new field house, you know.
So, do you remember how many kids were in your graduation
I
class?
think there were about 80.
80. How many were in your graduation class?
315, I think.
Mine started at 600 and we graduated at 468.
Yeah, because my brother was in the ones before Perry Meridian, and I mean, he, you know, the high school doesn't mean anything to him because the classes were so big, because right there before Perry Meridian was built, you know, the graduating classes were like 700.
Yeah.
You know, and so he had his little group of friends, but
That's-
like he didn't come back for the reunions or anything, you know, he said
Right.
it just, well, he went to Ball State, he went to college, you know, and everything, and he said, you know, coming back for a class that was that big to people that you really didn't even know, you know, yeah, before Perry Meridian was built, those classes really got, because he graduated in 64, so see, in 64, those classes were already up to
Yeah.
like 700 and, you know,
So-
something.
Technology today. Are you a technology user? Do you use Facebook, or do you have a tablet or a computer? Or you have a cell phone.
He does
Yes.
have a
Yes,
cell
you do
phone.
have a cell phone.
That's enough right there.
So let me ask you this question and we'll wrap it up. This will be the last question. If you could give advice to a young person today, what would your advice be? What's your sage wisdom from your advanced 103 years? What would you tell a young person today?
Well, the best thing they could do is give their life to the Lord. That's the most important thing.
Truth.
And one of the main things is that I would like to see established is the home. The breakdown of the home today is terrible.
Yeah.
Mom's out running around somewhere, dad's out running around somewhere. They're working night and day to try to make a living, and that the policy is that the one family can't make it now in today's economy.
Right.
So, but you know,
You don't need cable TV, and you don't need a brand new car, and you
No,
don't
you
need the
don't.
large house.
but you
It's nice, but it's not necessary.
that's right.
Yeah, well, that's good news. That's good to hear. Anything else you'd like to share? Your shoe size? That's the only thing I haven't asked you. What size shoes do you wear?
10 and a half,
Okay.
10 medium.
All right.